Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to share with you how to do some simple watercoloring with your Arteza brush markers. The stamps I'm going to be using today are from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps, and like usual, all the supplies I'm using are going to be listed and linked down in the description box below. So if you see anything you like, you can click those links and it'll take you directly to the products. Now to start off with, I am using this large flower stamp from Cracker Box and Susie Stamps, and I'm placing it in my MISTI and arranging it with that sentiment onto a piece of watercolor paper. I'm stamping on the textured side of the watercolor paper, so I am using my MISTI for stamping. Whenever you use cling stamps in your MISTI, you want to go ahead and take out your foam piece or your mouse pad, and that's going to give you enough space to stamp with your cling mounted stamps. You want to give it a good press and then go ahead and lift up the lid, and it should be stuck down really securely to the lid of your MISTI. I'm stamping with VersaFine Clair and Nocturne today. That's my favorite ink to stamp with whenever I'm using my watercolors. Use a water-safe ink, whether it be an archival ink, whatever you have on hand. Just make sure you stamp with a water-safe ink whenever you are watercoloring. If you don't have a water-safe ink, another good option is to heat emboss. That's also going to give you a little bit of a well around all of your images, so you don't have to wait for dry time. Because I'm stamping on the textured side, I am going to stamp about 3 times. That's going to really bring my MISTI into play here and help out with all that stamping one on top of the other. But because I have stamped so many times, I am going to give this a good heat set with my heat tool before I start watercoloring. Now I will be using my Arteza brush markers to do my watercoloring today. This is one of the easiest ways for me to watercolor. I have a video that I share a lot of different techniques with these markers. It's my main review on these markers. I will leave that linked in the top right hand corner. Now to do my watercoloring along with those brush markers, I'm also using the Arteza water brush pens. Now, if you don't have brush pens, you can use a regular watercolor brush and some water. Same exact thing. This just holds the water in the well of the pen, and then you just press that little red button whenever you want some water to come out. I'm using very simple watercolor techniques. I am putting down a little bit of color onto the paper and blending that out. Then wherever I feel like I want it a little bit darker, I'm scribbling some of the marker onto an acrylic block. Any slick surface will do, whether it's just a piece of laminated cardstock, a piece of plastic like wrapper from your stamps, anything like that, anything slick that will just hold that color for you. I put a little bit of that color onto my acrylic block and then pick it up with my water brush from there. That's also a great way to mix colors. With these brushes, the color that you get in the marker might not be exactly what you're looking for. So learning a little bit of how colors mix together is really great, especially when you're using brushes like this. You can just mix them on a little palette and get the exact color you want. So for my flowers, I am using some pinks for those roses, some yellows for the daisies, and then just all the different flowers that are kind of in stems, I'm using some blues and purples. Then for the leaves, I did just go with one color of green. You could really mix this up and use a few different colors on the different leaves that are on the flowers, but I just went with one color for very, very simple. Now here, I am not being too careful to stay in the lines. I am doing a very loose, very quick watercolor. It works really well with this stamp because if you look at the flowers, these are not perfectly drawn flowers. There are just some squiggly lines in places. All the leaves aren't connected. All the different leaves of the flowers aren't connected. There are some open spaces, so it really helps having an image like this to do some very loose and very quick, messy watercolor. Once I had the bouquet colored in, I let it sit for just a second, and then I moved on to the vase or the jug that these are in. For this, I'm using a gray color. Again, just using the same techniques, putting a little color down, washing it out with my water, and then coming in and actually adding a little bit of color directly onto that wet paper. That's going to give me some really dark spaces. Then once I felt like I was happy with that jug, it's time to work on the area around that vase. So it kind of looked like it was floating in midair the way it was stamped. So I'm adding a little bit of grounding with a gray wash underneath, and again using those same techniques. Putting down a little bit of color from ink I had scribbled onto an acrylic block, and then coming in directly with my marker onto that wet surface and just blending that out. You don't want to do that technique too often because it will run out your markers really quickly, but in little areas like this, it's okay. Now, around my flowers, I am going to add a little bit of a blue wash. What I like to do with this is scribble down some of that color onto the acrylic block and then add quite a bit of water to really wash it out. Then I take just a drop of that, add it to an area, and then blend it out with even more water from my brush, and that's going to give that really washed out look. Now again, you don't need to be super careful with this because the overall image is kind of messy. You can do a little bit more of a messy wash here as well. It doesn't need to go directly up to the lines. Whenever you move on to this, you do want to make sure that the flowers and everything around it is dry before you go in and you do these large washes, or else you will get a little bit of bleeding. Once this was dry, look at how beautiful that is. And overall, this took me about 10 minutes to watercolor. Now for the sentiment, I used the Hello Crafty Friends sentiment. However, I didn't want that S on the friends. So what I did was each time I inked it up, I just covered that S with a piece of painter's tape, inked up the stamp, and then removed the tape. I stamped it down a few times with my Misty, each time making sure I masked off that S and then removed the tape before I stamped, and I ended up with that Hello Crafty Friend sentiment. Now to finish this card off, I just matted the panel with a piece of black cardstock and then attached everything to an A2 card base. This card is super simple and fast. It is exactly what I need it to be these days. That is going to do it for me today. Don't forget all the information and the links down in the description box below. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!